Bonjour à tous. Hello everyone. Aujourd'hui, on va parler au sujet des compléments d'objets indirects. So hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about indirect object pronouns. Now we had already previously talked about direct object pronouns, but we're going to tack on just a little bit more and talk about indirect. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So first up, can you recognize if the noun in this sentence is either direct or indirect? So I have an example in English. It says, Jean gives Marie the flowers. So in this sentence, what is the subject? Who is talking? It's Jean. And then what is the verb? What is Jean doing? He's giving something, so gives is the verb. And to find the direct object, remember we have to ask ourselves the question, what or who plus the verb. So in this sentence, we have to say Jean gives what? So what is Jean giving? He's giving the flowers. So the flowers is our direct object. To find an indirect object, you ask yourself the question, to whom or to what plus the verb. So in this case, we'd say to whom or to what is Jean giving the flowers? And so in this case, we find out that Marie is our indirect because that's to whom he is giving the flowers. So to find indirects, remember I already talked about this, you say what or whom in order to find your direct object. And to find the indirect object, ask yourself the question, to what or to whom? So again, we're asking, Jean gives Marie the flowers. To whom is Jean giving the flowers? He's giving them to Marie. So in French, it's a little easy to find the indirect object. It usually comes after the word a with an accent grave. So in these three examples, we have Jean donne les fleurs à Marie. And so à Marie right here is our indirect object pronoun. And the deuxième exemple, the second example, we have Elle lit le roman à ses élèves. So she is reading the book to her students. And so à ses élèves is the indirect object. And then troisième, the third one, we have nous raconterons une histoire aux enfants. And so aux enfants is our indirect object there. If you don't remember the contractions with a from French 1, now is a really good time to brush up on them because it's really helpful in finding the indirect object. I'm also going to give you a little recap right now. So with contractions with a, you first have to take a plus a definite article. And your definite articles are le, la, les, and l'apostrophe. So in those, when you have a plus le, a plus la, or le, it becomes au, so o. And then a plus la stays the same. It stays a la. A plus l'apostrophe stays the same, a l'apostrophe. And then a plus les, les, changes to o with an x, so aux right here. If you don't remember those, now is a really good time to brush up on those. So make sure you watch a YouTube video about those as well. So in English, we have two different ways of saying an indirect object pronoun. We can say, Jean gives Marie the flowers, which is what we usually say, or we can say, Jean gives the flowers to Marie, which is a little bit longer. But in French, there's only one way to say it, and you have to say it the second way in English. You have to say it as Jean gives the flowers to Marie. So in French, we would say Jean donne les fleurs à Marie. So that's where this a comes in really handy because that clues you in as to what is your indirect object. So the pronouns for direct and indirect object are mostly the same except for in the third person. So direct object pronouns in the third person for her are la and l'apostrophe. And for him or it is le l'apostrophe. And for them or it plural is les. Indirect object pronouns only have two different forms for him and her and it or them. So for her, him, or it, it's lui. So for her and him, it's lui. And for them, it's leur without an S. So we have Jean sees her, Jean la voit, and then Jean gives her the flowers, it's Jean lui donne les fleurs. So you have to make sure that you know that in the third person, they are not the same pronouns. With leur, Leur meaning to them is never ever going to have an S on the end. So if I wanted to say I'm talking to them, I'd say je leur parle. If I want to say that I had told them a message, it's tu leur as raconté un message. But when I'm using leur as their, a possessive adjective, I put an S on the end in the plural. So in this first example at the bottom, I have j'aime le chien. I like their dogs, but I'm not saying I'm liking them dogs. So basically, if you're using leur as an indirect object pronoun, there's never an S. But when I'm using leur as a possessive adjective, like my, your, his, those types of things, when I'm using it as their in a possessive adjective, there is an S in the plural. So la place, where things get placed. Indirect object pronouns have the same placement as direct object pronouns. They go before the conjugated verb. So je ne leur écris pas de lettre. It still gets sandwiched in between that negative. So the ne and the pas still go around the verb and the pronoun, either direct or indirect. When there are two verbs, just like with direct object pronouns, it goes before the infinitive, so it gets sandwiched in between the two verbs. So we have je vais leur écrire une lettre. I'm going to write them a letter. In the passé composé, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but I want you to just recognize it, that in the passé composé, the indirect object pronoun is going to be placed before the helping verb. So it's going to be placed before avoir or before être. And then when you have the imperative, it gets placed after the verb. So that's this example right here. We have écrivez-leur une lettre, write them a letter. And so in that imperative with that command, the indirect object pronoun becomes after the verb. So me, te, nous, and vous, I talked about this already. Those stay the same for direct and indirect object pronouns. They have tu m'avois or tu me vois for an direct object pronoun, you see me. And then an indirect object pronoun, we have tu m'écris une lettre, you write me a letter. So it still is the same and it still has the same placement. The only difference in pronouns is in that third person. Unfortunately, malheureusement, on ne peut pas toujours penser en anglais. We cannot always think in English. So get that out of your brain right now, that you cannot continue to think in English. You have to start thinking in French. Otherwise, you'll start making a lot of grammar mistakes. So verbs suivis par la préposition à. So verbs that are followed by the preposition à. We have je téléphone à ma mère. Changes to je lui téléphone. So I call her. Then we have nous répondons au professeur. We respond to the teachers. Nous leur répondons. And remember, there's no S because I'm using it as an indirect object. Il va rendre visite à sa copine. So he is going to visit his girlfriend. Il va lui rendre visite. So remember, it gets sandwiched in between those two verbs. So a couple examples that I want you to write down. We have I write him. So je lui écris. So I write him. I write it. Je l'écris. I'm writing it. Remember now, these are both, this is an indirect object, and then this is a direct object. So we've got the L apostrophe. Now, this is where it gets a little bit confusing when you're using direct or indirect object pronouns. We have I write them. So is it a person or is it an object? In this first example, I have je les écris, and I'm referring to I write the letters. But if I'm referring to a person, like I'm writing to my friends, j'écris à mes amis, I'm writing to my friends, I need je leur écris. So just keep that in mind, that if it's people or an objects, that might change whether or not it's a direct or an indirect object pronoun. So répondez à la question. This is what you need to write down and respond. La première, numéro un, the first one, number one, we have prêtes-tu tes devoirs à ses amis? So do you loan your homework to your friends? And we need to say, no, I don't loan my homework to my friends. So we should have written down, non, je ne leur prête pas mes devoirs. Non, je ne leur prête pas mes devoirs. No, I don't loan my homework to them. Numéro 2, écris-tu à tes grands-parents? Do you write to your grandparents? We needed to say oui. Je leur écris. So yes, I write to them. So sometimes you might not have a direct object in your sentence. You might only have an indirect object. That's why it's important to think and ask yourself the question, what or whom, or to what and to whom. So you can find your direct or your indirect object pronoun easily. I'm going to take a real quick break, and I want to talk about this part right here with écrit and tu. This is called inversion. So if you were with me in French 3 or 4 last year, and now you're in French 4 or 5, this you've already seen before, and we've talked about this. If you're in French 3 this year, you have not seen this before. You might have seen it, but we haven't talked about it. But inversion is considered a higher level of thinking. Like in English, we say do you or you do, and it's the same thing in French. To form the inverted form, it's quite simple. All you have to do is switch your subject and your verb. So they just switch spots, and that's pretty much it, and you add in a little dash. So instead of saying tu écris à tes grands-parents with a question mark, we can just say écris-tu à tes grands-parents. And makes you sound a lot more French and a lot more well-known with the French language. Numéro 3, we have téléphones-tu à ton ami? We needed to say oui, je lui téléphone. So yes, I called him. So ask yourself the question, who are you calling or to whom are you calling? We're calling to my friend. It's really important to notice the a with an accent grave. That's super important to notice that. Numéro 4, dis-tu la vérité à madame? Did you tell the truth to madame, or you tell the truth to madame? We have oui, je lui dis la vérité. So in here we had a direct and an indirect object pronoun. We needed to ask ourselves the question, what do you tell? And the truth was what you told or what you tell. And then à madame is your indirect object pronoun, to whom or to what are you telling the truth. Numéro 5, rends-tu visite à tes cousins? So do you go visit your cousins? We need to say non, je ne leur rends pas visite. So it looks like a lot. However, just remember that your indirect object pronoun goes before the conjugated verb or before the infinitive if there are two verbs. C'est tout pour aujourd'hui. That's it for today. Si vous avez des questions, if you have questions, montrez-les-moi, show them to me or ask me. Et à plus, and I'll talk to you later.